This video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. In 1941, the USSR was facing a famine dead in the eyes. Hitler's Nazi regime during the height of Nazi control of Western and Central Europe invaded and took over Ukraine, sending literal millions of Ukrainians off to Germany to work in slave labor camps. Russia at the time had adopted a scorched earth policy where, rather than leave resources and potential intelligence behind as they retreated, they instead destroyed everything, including the buildings, mines, and arable land as they went. This created a problem, however, and by midsummer 1941, Ukraine and the surrounding territories of southern Russia were quite literally the agricultural food source for the Soviet Union, and now the citizens and the military were starving. Hey everyone, my name is Onepeg, and today we're going to take a little bit of a tangent. Well, not really away, but maybe adjacent to typical Tarkov content. See, I made a tweet a little while back that asked what videos you guys would like to see, and well, Pestily responded by saying I should make a video about the history of tushonka. So, challenge accepted, Pest. For those of you unfamiliar with me or my content, the primary focus of my channel is to talk about a video game called Escape from Tarkov, which, iconically, and even a little ironically, has us collecting on pretty regular occasion and for different reasons, cans of tushonka. So, if you end up enjoying this, maybe give me a sub, yeah? Anyway, this here is a can of it. It's nothing super special, really, and it doesn't have any preservatives. It's a can of beef with some fat, with some salt, a bay leaf, and some onions. Now, typically, tushonka is viewed as a beef product, but back then, it was traditionally made with pork. In the 1870s, during the Russo-Kievan War, where Russia finally overcame after some 50-odd years the Kievan Khanate, the Russians had begun producing canned meat as a way to preserve food rations for its armed forces, adopting a method born in the Ural Mountains where the Samoyed people of the region had been preserving meat inside of jars using salt and fat, obviously a metal can, kept better, and shipped better. The production of the canned meat products as rations for the Russian armed forces tended to keep pace through World War I. And through World War II, all of the canned meat that Russia produced was almost exclusively and entirely for its armed services. As the era of Soviet Russia began, and during Russia's Industrial Revolution, the meat canning industry went from something that was primarily cottage-based to a large-scale food staple across the continent. However, during World War II, Russia saw its food production faltering and ended up turning to the other allies for aid. See, during World War II, 80% of all of the grown food that fed Russia up until this point was from collective farms throughout Crimea and the surrounding area. And Germany knew this. A starving army is an ineffectual army. When the southern Russian territories were overtaken, it cut the produced food supply of Russia in half. And most, estimated to be some 70% of the equipment used to produce canned meat, was lost. Of the 45 or so nationally, commercially viable canning plants in operation at the time of the German invasion, 30 of these plants were cut off of their supply chain, crippling the food supply of Russia's army. So in walked, rolled, President Franklin D. Roosevelt. If you're like me, you enjoy RPGs. If you're also like me, sometimes you don't always want to be sitting at the computer when you're playing those RPGs, which is why we have mobile games like Raid Shadow Legends to keep us entertained. So that way I can hang out on the couch with Arnie and play instead. If you enjoy PvE, gather up a ton of your homies and take on a clan boss. If you like PvP, grab either one team or three and take on other teams in the arena. My favorite champion? This Frankenstein-looking dude right here. Why? Because he calls down lightning from the sky, and when that lightning hits people, it ends up giving my guys a big ol' shield. You survive, you win, right? And there's a ton happening in Raid this month. Special events every day, a bunch of awesome new champions, and the brand new huge feature, Guardian Raid, that gives you a load of new ways to use your champions. And at the start of December, Raid's releasing one of its biggest, most anticipated features ever. Take a look at this. Looks insane, right? With all these new updates and an even bigger one right around the corner, now's the perfect time to get started in Raid. If you wait any longer, you're only going to get left behind. So if you want to get a huge head start in Raid, all you have to do is click the link in the description below, or scan this QR code right here in the corner, and you'll get an epic hero, Chernaru, who's amazing in the Doom Tower, by the way, 200,000 silver, an XP boost, an energy refill, and an ancient shard so you can summon another bonus awesome champion as soon as you get in the game. And all of this treasure is waiting for you right there. Once you're in, you can find me in-game under the name Onepeg. If you're fast enough, You can even join my clan. Click on the link in the description or check out the QR code, and I'll see you in Raid. See, at the time, the United States had a problem. Through the late 1930s, the United States was suffering a decline in demand for meat. People were just not eating it, largely in part to the now classic novel written by Upton Sinclair, The Jungle, which outlined deplorable conditions and quality control of the meatpacking industry in Chicago. But meat kept for a long time when it was seasoned and packaged appropriately. The rather popular novelty canned pork Spam had, and still has to this day, a shelf life of literal years. So in 1941, when the Soviet Union ended up requesting food aid from us because it had no other alternative, Roosevelt responded in kind via the Lend-Lease Act, where we provided canned pork to the Soviets along with dried milk, butter, grains, and eggs. We sent the Russians Spam. However, the rumor is that Stalin didn't like Spam and instead requested that we send them tushonka, the canned meat that they had been producing based on the Ural Mountain recipe. And we obliged, by even going so far as to sell it to the American working public as a good thing, as depicted in this full-page ad placed by Purina Mills.
American-made tushonka is a favorite with Nikolai, with the whole Russian army, in fact. Tushonka is a special Russian delicacy. Yes, pork produced on your arm may be packed in the United States as tushonka and sent with butter, dried milk, and eggs, grains, and other Lend-Lease food to fight the Russian front. You can be proud that you are helping feed our vigilant Russian allies, and that by doing so you are helping our boys at the front, helping yourself and your country. For every time Nikolai risks his life, kills another Nazi, shoots down a Messerschmitt, it's just one step nearer victory, one job less for our boys to do.
Propaganda pieces like this were everywhere. Whether it was talking about Russians as Nikolai or going after the Japanese following Pearl Harbor, these types of propaganda pieces were all over the place. And if you're wondering if Purina Mills is the same Purina that we see today, the answer is yes. At the time, just about every food packing plant in the country was creating tushonka to send overseas to the Russians. And in the years following the end of World War II, Russia continued to face hardship related to being able to supply its citizens with food. The scorched earth policy that they had adopted while disallowing German forces to use and utilize the land also made it incredibly difficult for the Russian populace to use it as well. To compound problems, the United States decided to, suddenly in 1945, cut off the food supply to Russia as part of its Lend-Lease operations coming to a close. Surplus amounts of American-made tushonka, while supposedly being distributed among the population, at 15 million cans per week, by the way, began showing up on store shelves for purchase rather than as charity, per what the United Nations said was going on. And once those were sold out, the Russian government decided it was going to continue the tradition of mass-producing the canned meat product itself. In the 1950s, it was marketed as Zavtrak Turista, or tourist's breakfast, meaning it was meant to cure the hunger of someone on the move, like a soldier. And at the time, there was nothing to be more proud of or to aspire to become than a strong Russian soldier, right? You didn't need anything really to make tushonka, just scraps of meat. When Russia decided to start making its own tushonka rather than relying on the U.S. effort, it began its own counter-propaganda pieces stating that American tushonka was being shipped into Russia and only utilized the private parts of pigs when making it, and not more desirable parts of the animal, like people would prefer. In reality, that's all tushonka ever was, leftovers, because that's what the Soviet Union had in abundance. Scraps of beef and pork. And in 1957, when Nikita Khrushchev announced that the Soviet policy would restructure all state animal farms to support the mass production of canned meat products, tushonka single-handedly drove the evolution of the Soviet meatpacking industry. Because of its popularity with the public in the years following World War II as a local food, combined with the ease and low expense of making it, because it, for instance, used fat trimmings as a preservative that gave it shelf lives of years, and the public visibility that the Soviet government was doing good for its people by providing them with meat, it ended up being a logistically perfect product. In the course of researching this video, I stumbled across a 165-page document written by a CIA operative back in 1953 that is now declassified. And that's not an exaggeration. That's what I found. And that contributed in large part to all of the research that I put into this. That is, of course, in addition to collegiate texts that have been generated either about the country, the war, or the food that had come as a result of it, as well as different news articles and obviously period pieces like that propaganda ad that I showed you from Purina. What's interesting about all of this is that it all, regardless of whether or not it was Russian-based or American-based, all attributes the fact that tushonka, that red can that is now sitting on that shelf behind my head, as being a staple of the Russian cuisine or normal weekly grocery run, if you want to think about it that way, as being so because of the United States and its involvement in World War II with Lend-Lease and obliging Stalin's request to generate that specific product to the recipe that they wanted. What else is interesting is it never would have come to fruition had it not been for the citizenship of Russia, the normal people living their day-to-day civilian lives, becoming so accustomed to it as surplus food from the military's involvement. Prior to World War II, that canned meat was only something that was used specifically for Russian military rations, because that's all they ever made it for. So now that it became, I guess, a surplus product and was feeding normal citizens because the food supply was so diminished in Russia, it ended up spurning into something that they used on a day-to-day basis. It's crazy to think that something as Russian as tushonka is, and showing up inside of Escape from Tarkov, has its roots firmly planted with the citizenship of Russia because of America sending them the cans. Never thought I was going to see that one in the course of researching this video. That I thought was nuts. What a twist. Anyway, guys, I thought this was really cool to make. If you guys end up having some ideas for another item in the game that you would like me to research out and make another video like this on, if you thought this was cool enough, this was fun for me. So hopefully you guys dug it, and I'll see you in the next one.